Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm joined now by Alex Stewart.
Morning, Joe.
Hello. And Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe.
Okay, less weird kind of breathing mouth noise there.
That wasn't a weird breathing mouth noise. You know exactly what was happening.
Yeah, I do, and I won't say because this is a family show. Today's episode is sensible transfers. We're focusing on three teams: Arsenal, Leicester City and Brighton. Now, for those of you who don't know, in the Sensible Transfers series, we analyse teams, we identify problem areas, and then we suggest solutions in the form of incoming players. So welcome to Sensible Transfers. But before we continue, I'd love to remind you all that we have expanded this series across the Athletic's editorial site. Alex Stewart has been keenly working with all of the Athletic's club correspondent writers to create a Sensible Transfers article for every club that the Athletic covers, which is all the Premier League teams, a couple in Scotland, 5 in the Championship. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, gosh darn it, I wish this family podcast stroke YouTube channel would make a video, Sensible Transfers video about my club, and we haven't because your club is tiny and meaningless, we have written an editorial piece specifically for you in exactly the same form. Hey, if you're a Sheffield Wednesday fan, not tiny and meaningless, very important club, very important, but, you know, we haven't made a video about you. Alex has worked with Nancy Frostick to write a significant Sensible Transfers piece about you, which I haven't read yet, but I'm informed is very good, Alex.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and he can say that because he wrote some of it. So if you would like to read these pieces, or indeed any of the other pieces that appear on The Athletic, or just give it a try, you can do. And at the moment we're offering 40% off an annual subscription, which works out to something like, in the UK, just over maybe £3. I can't remember how much. Anyway, it's £3-4 a month. Who knows? It could be 100. I don't know. It's not 100. It's about £3 or £4. And if you visit theathletic.com/Tifo transfers, that's /Tifo transfers, you can make use of that 40% off offer. I am informed that there are. I think there's free trials if you just land on the site too. So if you want to try it out first, you could always do that and then come back and use our sign-up code. Anyway, without further ado, we will get on with it, and we'll be starting with Arsenal Football Club. Okay, Arsenal. Now, before we get started with Arsenal, I am aware that our podcast producer, Adonis, is actually a dedicated Arsenal fan. And so I thought, in all fairness, you know, we want to hear the fans' voice on this podcast. It's not just us stuffy old fools that you want to hear from. We want to know what actual people who actually like football are thinking. So I thought before we get into positions that we're going to inspect in the Arsenal team, I'd just check each time with Adonis that this is actually accurate. The first one, Adonis, is a decap has asked for a centre-back. Do Arsenal need a centre-back?
Yes.
Okay, yes. That's a really good start. So, Alex, I'm going to come to you first, and I'm going to ask you to explain why Arsenal need a new centre-back. I mean, if anyone's watched the games recently with David Luiz involved, then I suppose this probably won't be entirely necessary. But if you could caveat it with the Arteta way, what I'm looking for from you is to understand exactly what Arteta is trying to do, and therefore how that informs his need for a particular type of centre-back.
Okay, well, that's tricky because there's essentially two answers here. What we think Arteta wants to do, based on stuff that he's said on how he tried to get Arsenal playing when he first took over, is a 4-2-3-1, where much of the creativity is coming from the double pivot and also from a number 10. And the centre-backs are there to progress the ball quickly to those midfielders and do the defending. That hasn't worked so much for various reasons, and so he has also used a back three where David Luiz has sat in the centre and used his genuinely good range of long passing to progress the ball out wide and try and generate dynamism and attack from the quick wide players like Nicolas Pepe or Aubameyang or Saka. So It's hard to know which of those. We can assume that Arteta will probably want version A, but version B is what he has also used, probably because of the personnel available. So from that perspective, Arsenal, we can assume, should be looking for a defensively solid centre-back, somebody who doesn't panic, somebody who is able to get the ball forward quite quickly and ably to the midfield double pivot, passing the ball through the lines. They're probably not looking for somebody who can rake the ball out into the wide areas like David Luiz, because that's probably not how they're going to play in the future.
Okay, that's interesting. Correct me when I am wrong, but I tend to see defenders in two categories. The defenders who are really good sort of stoppers almost, who are big, beefy and gruff and will tackle you hard and then, make the easiest pass or lob it forwards. And then the sort of incredibly technically gifted small defenders with all of the turning and the ballet lessons. There are some in between, aren't there? Those aren't just the only two types.
No, I mean, the best central defenders are people like Virgil van Dijk, who are both of those things. But obviously, they're incredibly highly prized because of their ability to do the defensive fundamentals well and also to be able to progress the ball. It is worth saying that in looking at central defenders, there are a couple of things that make it really difficult. Firstly is statistics with central defenders don't really reflect a great deal. Like, there may be a useful guide if you're looking for certain types of defenders. But by and large, because defence is such a systemic thing, really you need to be understanding how that defender fits into the system that they're currently playing in. And I think also crucially, who their defensive partner is. So in the video that we did looking at the Champions League fixture between Manchester City and Real Madrid, we talked about how Real Madrid's two defenders are very, very different in terms of what they do. So one is much more progressive, one is much more back, looking for blocks, looking for clearances, the other one brings the ball out. So I think it's not just a question of saying that stats aren't that helpful for central defenders. It's also worth pointing out that you really do need to have a grip of the system that defender is already playing in, the sort of stuff that they're expected to do, and the kind of defensive partner that they're currently working with and also that they will be working with.
And presumably William Saliba is a player who will at least be in contention to be one of those who a new person might be working with.
I would suggest that William Saliba should be the first defender's name on the team sheet. Yeah, I mean, he's done very, very well at Saint-Etienne in the matches that he's played. Obviously, he had injury problems. Saint-Etienne did not have a good season, but they were worst when Saliba wasn't present. And actually, for that very reason, one of the names I've suggested is Wesley Fofana, who is the person who played mostly alongside Saliba at Saint-Etienne, is in a similar sort of mould. The two of them work well together. Fofana is also young. He's also decent at passing. He's good in the air. So he would be, I mean, it sort of seems like a bit of a cheat to go back and say, we'll just buy the other one as well. But that is actually quite a good idea.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll come back to you for your others, and I'll go to Seb now. So, Seb, with what Alex says in mind, who are you suggesting for potential incomings in this area?
So I went a slightly different direction. I went, had a kind of more abstract solution. And
surprise, surprise.
Yeah, on the basis that Arsenal have some financial restrictions, I went to Inter Milan to snatch up the veteran Diego Godin. Because
he really is a veteran, isn't he? I mean,
he's really 35. He's almost as old as I am. He's 34, but soon to be 35. And the reason is that I'm not shopping for someone who's going to play 38 games. I don't need that. What I'm focused on is almost really a role model. You've got Saliba coming in. I completely agree with Alex that he's going to be one of the first names on the team sheet next season. And given what Arsenal have spent on him, you'd hope so. I want not just a leader, because that's quite trite. I want someone with defensive credentials. I want someone with a proper defensive resume. I want someone in that department who is respected more than a David Luiz type. I accept that David Luiz is a interesting personality and someone that's well liked within the Arsenal dressing room, but I want that kind of almost a veteran leadership there. So Godin's a nice little option. I don't actually think, for the sake of filling out the first team, Arsenal need any more defenders beyond Saliba. They just need a better direction. They need a defence which is protected a little bit better. So hence some of my selections in defensive midfield, which we'll get to. But Godin's a nice little budget option, and might be quite useful as well.
Let's talk about David Luiz just for a second, because his contract was extended, right? Or he was offered a new 1-year contract. I can't remember which one. What does that say to you about the defence at this club at this point? I mean, is it just that? Have I been caught up, as many people have, in viewing David Luiz as a sort of, air quotes, complete joke on the basis of those fairly frequent, or at least maybe not frequent, but fairly consistent mistakes, game-changing mistakes that he seems to make? Presumably there's a valuable player there. Arsenal obviously see that if they're prepared to extend or offer a new 1-year contract.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's quite easy to kind of bounce between sort of the binary assessments of a player like David Luiz. I think what it actually describes is that Arsenal aren't willing to spend large amounts of money on their defence at this point in time, or that they can't afford to spend large amounts of money. And so the logic presumably is that renewing David Luiz's contract is the cheaper option, as opposed to buying someone from somewhere else who perhaps doesn't have any experience of English football, doesn't know the players in the Arsenal dressing room. For whatever we think about David Luiz, he is popular. He is a liked player. He is a big personality, and players at the club react well to him. So I kind of, beyond the initial lulls of that decision to extend his deal, there is a logic there, and I can kind of understand it. The key, though, is ensuring that he doesn't have to play too often. It's and Alex touched on it. There are qualities that he has which are very useful to what Arteta is trying to build, but also abilities which are quite difficult to find. I mean, you don't get many players with his distributional abilities for less than sort of 20-25 million pounds. So if you've got one, and if you can properly protect him, then you might as well just keep him there.
Can you remind me what game it was when he hid his face and then revealed it, when he was sort of gone down under false pretenses, I suppose, after a tackle, was attempting to get someone sent off, and then was smiling about it to the cameras or to the crowd? Because I always remember that and associate it
was when he
with
was
David
at Chelsea.
Luiz. It was when he was at Chelsea. I always remember that, and I always remember. I feel like I very much struggle to try and rid that association. Do you know what I mean? Like to forget about that face, because he does have quite a striking face as well. To forget about that face, and I feel like it corrupts my clearly not very objective perspective when it comes to David Luiz, who, as you say, has many positive qualities. I wonder if that's true for other people.
I don't know how to respond to that, other than to say
that's fine.
I think I think that was against. He was definitely a Chelsea player at the time, and it was at Stamford Bridge in that far right hand corner, looking from the press box. And
I think it might have been against United.
I think it might have been against Man United, and I think it was part of a sequence which led to Raphael getting sent off. I might be wrong about that, so I'm sure the internet will be keen to tell me if I am. But I think it's about right.
Anyway, the things you remember, hey? People's faces. Who'd have thought? Evolution has designed us for a reason. Adonis, Surav Manu has asked us to talk about a defensive midfielder. Is that a position that Arsenal need to fill?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Adonis is my favourite person on this podcast. He gives me exactly what I want. Alex, again, tell me why they need to fill this position, and also what we think, at least, Arteta might be expecting here.
I think the main reason that they need to fill this position is that the two guys that they've brought in recently to do it have not settled. So Guendouzi, who is not a pure defensive midfielder, but has had disciplinary issues. Torreira, again, not a pure defensive midfielder, and at Sampdoria excelled in a diamond midfield. And I think is still a very, very good player, but hasn't clearly won his confidence. He wants somebody who is able to tackle, shield the back four or back three, but also drop in and receive the ball and spray it around a bit. And this is why he's been using Xhaka in that position. Largely alongside Ceballos.
Ceballos,
that's the fella.
I was trying to work out who you were saying. Who is he talking about?
He's invented a player.
I have just the worst blind spot when it comes to pronunciation. And I think, again, whether he's doing a 3-4-3 or a 4-2-3-1, the midfield is constructed as a double pivot. So there is going to be one more defensive player. There's going to be one more progressive player. I think pretty much every team recognises that the need for somebody to win the ball back and screen the defence, potentially to drop in between the two central defenders of a back four and bring the ball out, like that's just a kind of generally recognised need across most teams. And he probably just doesn't have confidence in the people that are there. Arsenal lack kind of bite in that part of the pitch. So that's part of what they want. I mean, the cheap option, who I think is worth looking at, is a guy called Alexis Blin, who was at Amiens, who got relegated, and so he'd be relatively inexpensive. But 23 years old, French, very, very good defensive numbers, reasonable progressor of the ball, the sort of person that you could bring in and see how it goes without it being a massive outlay. De Gibril Sau, who's at Eintracht Frankfurt, is a really, really strong defensive midfielder, much more kind of all-action, ball-winning, quite tall as well, which is good, gives aerial presence in that area. Less good in terms of distribution, but would break up play very well and ship it to whoever the more progressive player is. Obviously, the guy they've been linked with a lot is Thomas Partey. I don't think Partey is actually a straightforward defensive midfielder. I think he's much more dynamic. He gets forward a lot more. But again, you can kind of see the argument. I think that would leave them without sufficient cover if they were only playing a double pivot, though.
I like that. Seb?
Okay, so I like my my defensive midfielders to be long-legged. Something reassuring about that, about their ability to tackle.
I like my central defensive long legs. Give it on the ones with the long legs.
Yeah, that's what you sound like to me. Has got very long legs.
He does, which is what I like. I've got three other options, which all players with very long legs. First one is, all of them also, Jeffrey Kondogbia. Peter Lim is doing weird things at Valencia, including selling Danny Parejo for very little money to Villarreal, apparently. Kondogbia, veteran defensive midfielder. We know what he brings. A bit of security for Arsenal. Good footballer though. So, and it doesn't seem as if, it doesn't seem like Lim or Valencia are in team building mode. So there might be a little bit of a bargain to be done there.
Okay.
Another bargain option: go to Bournemouth and snatch up Philip Billing.
Yeah.
Not really convinced he was used particularly well by Eddie Howe last season. He's a good player. I would say last year he was asked to do a little bit too much. Like he was asked to be a jack of a few too many trades in that midfield. If you simplify his role, there's obviously a very good footballer there, but also pretty mighty physical presence as well. So that might be a nice deal. The one I really like though, and this is a little bit speculative because of who he plays for. I like Yanga Herrera, Granada's on loan Manchester City midfielder. A really interesting player. Young, I think he's still 22. Whether I don't know what his situation is at City, but I like the Arteta connection. So I'm banking on there being something to be done there potentially. But I like him. He's a little bit slighter than either Kondogbia or Billing. He's just a more slender footballer, but a good one too, and a really, really good tackler, which I'm sure Adonis will support me in saying that Arsenal desperately need.
Nice choice. I like Kondogbia. He's a good player.
Good player.
Okay, so if we're done with defensive midfielder, let's move on to the next role. Frederator Music asks for attacking midfielder. Now, Adonis, do Arsenal need an attacking midfielder?
Yes, man.
Okay. Alex, you know the drill by now.
I mean, basically what Arsenal lack is somebody who consistently gets the ball into the final third, into the penalty area, and creates what we call key passes, which are passes that open up a shooting opportunity. They're quite good up until that point, but there isn't somebody who can, to use a slightly trite phrase, unlock a defence, particularly deeper lying defences. So they want #creativity. This is the thing that...
Sure. They want online creativity.
Yeah. But people always talk in cliches about this stuff, don't they? It gets quite upsetting. But yeah, basically they want somebody who's good at making stuff happen in the final third. this is the area that we focused on in the written sensible transfers piece, and the main pick that I went for there was Pellegrini, the Roma 10. He is basically very good at doing all the things that get the ball into dangerous areas, whether that's passing, carrying, releasing nice little through balls. He can drift wide and cross as well. I would also mention two other Ligue 1 players quickly. Angelo Fulgini, who's at Angers, is probably the less expensive option, but nicely creative, does all of those sorts of busy little touches around the area. And Angers are a great side to watch. Jeffrey Nadalard, who is one of the players that Arsenal should never have let go, but did, has been flourishing there as well. The other option is somebody who we looked at before the World Cup as somebody who could potentially be really good and was during the World Cup, which is Alexander Golovin. Golovin kind of fell into a very weird situation at Monaco following a big money move. Monaco kind of imploded, but they still have a lot of good players in that squad. And Golovin is a very dynamic ball carrier. He's a good goal threat. He is creative, and he looks like the sort of player who could be slightly like Seb was saying about Kondogbia, who could be kind of rehabilitated out of a weird situation that he's found himself in that maybe makes him look less good than he actually is.
Okay, that's interesting. Seb?
Right, I went left field, and the symmetry will...
Are you going to preface every single selection with, I was slightly off-piste here?
Yeah, I feel like some of my selections were made quite late at night, and they felt very, very clever at the time, sure. And now in the cold light of day, maybe a little bit less so.
All that pistachio ice cream, hey? You got to be careful there, Seb, but do go on.
I went to Trabzonspor in Turkey, and I'm having a punt at Abdülkadir Ömür. My Turkish-speaking wife might correct me on the pronunciation there. She's actually just laughing at me. But yeah, diminutive, small, really, really skillful, lovely little sort of subtle range of passing. Context is a bit of a problem. I don't know how good he would be in a more physical league. And I don't know whether he is technically quite good enough to perform the role that I want from him here. But he's interesting. He's the kind of player that you might take a risk at and see if you can kind of grow him into a kind of evolved version of Mesut Ozil, possibly. So yeah, he's interesting and also probably cheap. I mean, in Turkey, he's 400 other players in world football at the moment. He has that kind of Messi moniker. He is the Turkish Messi, to go with every other country's Messi. But he's worth looking at.
Okay, cool. We've got one more for Arsenal, which we're going to rush through because we've got two other clubs to get to. I'm slightly fearful, but Adonis, do you need a striker if Lacazette leaves?
Really, Joe?
Oh, I feel scolded. Alex, this is just on the basis that Lacazette might be leaving. I read a rumour. If Lacazette does leave, I just a quick couple of names rather than the explanation of who might be good players to replace him.
Marcus Thuram, Rafael Leao.
Oh, lovely. That was quick. Seb, same, please.
No, I don't think he needs replacing. I think you've got Saka, you've got Martinelli coming back from injury. Emil Smith-Rowe will return from loan at some point. I think you're okay there.
Okay, well that was good and easy. So not much work to do, Adonis, for Arsenal. We'll be back shortly, and at which point we'll be covering Leicester City, followed by Brighton.
Hi there, I'm David Ornstein, and I've launched a brand new show on YouTube, Ask Ornstein, where I answer questions from our athletic subscribers. To get your question answered, simply leave a comment at the bottom of my column every Monday and I'll choose my favourites. To watch the show, head over to the Tifo Podcast YouTube channel, and a new episode will be up every Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, Leicester City. Now, listeners have sent in questions which we've picked up here and collected, and we've meshed with our own research. But the interesting bit for me, I think, that to discuss as it relates to Leicester is Jamie Vardy, because Jamie Vardy's he's getting on in age now. He's obviously the golden he was the Golden Boot winner in the Premier League this year. Am I right in saying that, Seb?
He was indeed.
He was indeed. So, I mean, at his age, he's clearly a very, very effective striker. But I thought this might sort of spur us on to have a conversation about how a club approaches replacing an ageing emblem and a player who's essentially unreplaceable, as is Jamie Vardy. So we'll get to that. But to start with, Edin asks for a winger, saying, it seems to me Leicester have a lack of quality wingers, and I'm sure that there are better options than Barnes and Gray. Seb, would you agree with that?
Not at all. Not at all. Harvey Barnes is a wonderful player, and will only get better. Damari Gray, slightly different issue, because he hasn't quite become the player that he was supposed to. He hasn't quite developed as he looked like he might at one point. But I think that's Leicester's responsibility to cure. I certainly wouldn't, in the hierarchy of their needs, I don't see winger as being something that needs addressing. Well, certainly not right now.
Okay, and Alex, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Well, we really are steaming now, aren't we? Ironic Virus 14 asks for a left back to potentially replace Chilwell. No hovering. No.
Okay,
I don't want to know what might come out of my mouth.
Can I just check out one name though that is interesting?
Is the name Ironic Virus 14?
No, it's not.
For winger?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I just want to. Fabian Rees, who's at Holstein Kiel in the Bundesliga 2, is a 6'2", incredibly quick winger with really good feet, and gets the ball into dangerous areas better than anyone in Bundesliga 2. Just wanted to,
Do you know who he reminds me of? Fabian Ruiz. Remember?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean,
no.
Even my pronunciation's not that bad.
No, the player Fabian Ruiz.
Yes, I know, but Rees and Ruiz are not homophones, are they?
I mean, sort of.
I feel like this might not be the strongest bit of podcast content. I think we...
The thing is, Seb, you got to trust in the silences. You got to trust in the little breaks. Yeah?
Silences make me feel uncomfortable, Joe.
I know, but you just dived straight into that one, didn't you? It's like you're sort of a wedding on a boring table, and you had to keep talking about yourself. There's a humour in the silences. There's a love. It builds over time. People grapple with the characters. They realise that we're fallible. But everything's fine. Ironic Virus 14 asks for a left back to potentially replace Chilwell. Seb, no silence, please. Dive right in.
Terrell Malacia from Feyenoord. There you go. Failing that, let's go back to Valencia and play on Peter Lim's Weird Mood and snatch Jose Gaia.
That sounds like a lovely concept album, playing on Peter Lim's Weird Mood. So, that's good. Tell me about Jose Gaia. What's so good about him?
Think of you kind of Spanish archetype of a left-sided fullback. Aggressive with the ball, good in attacking areas. I think we're working on the basis that Ben Chilwell is probably off. Or certainly is of interest to some very big and financially powerful clubs. So you're kind of trying to replicate his ability to kind of under and overlap in the attacking third. Jose Gaia, he's not the very best fullback on the continent. Once upon a time, he was expected to become that. Hasn't really worked out that way, but still a very good player. And we've touched on this topic a few times. Deserving of a better situation, I think. Deserving of a club that's moving in a slightly more positive direction.
Well, you touched on it there, but just explain to me what it is that Leicester get out of their fullbacks, Seb.
The best way of describing it is to look at what they were when their fullbacks were missing. So throughout the sort of the comeback period in the Premier League, Leicester became extremely narrow. They became quite slow paced. I suppose the term you'd use is thrust, as well as both being really good footballers. The gear changes that those two fullbacks provide are invaluable to Brendan Rodgers' football. And without them, there's a couple of other reasons why Leicester slumped. Let's not oversimplify, but fundamentally, without those fullbacks, they just don't have the kind of the attacking power that they need.
All right, so it's super important. Alex, with that in mind, and with your little giggle about the word thrust, can you tell me who should replace Ben Chilwell?
Yeah, if you want that word that begins with a T that I can't say without laughing again, Mikel Karbonik, who's at Legia Warsaw, who is a 19-year-old Polish under-19 international, provides much of that thing. He's He's very, very quick. He's very direct. He's a good crosser of the ball. He's been linked with a few bigger clubs, but he's a really, really interesting prospect. Two other things I think are worth saying. Jonathan Panzo, the former Chelsea youth product, who is at Monaco but has been on loan in Belgium. The reason he's nice is that he is very quick and gets forwards well, but he can also cover as a centre-back, which gives them options if they want to play three at the back, for example. The other thing is Luke Taylor, who's already there. Luke Taylor's really impressed in kind of covering towards the end of the season. Got his first assist in his first start, I think. So it's not like they necessarily have to go out. I mean, obviously, Rodgers will kind of weigh up whether or not Taylor's ready for first-team football. But, you know, young fullbacks coming into the side directly out of the academy have done well in the Premier League recently. So there's no reason to think that Taylor would be much different.
KCK finally asks for a striker as KCK says as a Vardy replacement. I assume perhaps they mean as a backup for now. But I do want to get onto some names that might suit here. But first, I thought it would be interesting to have a little bit of this conversation because when I tried to approach it in my mind, I had literally no idea what I would do in the position of Leicester at this point, because Jamie Vardy is, how old is he now? 33?
33.
He's 33. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of a striker, he really is getting on. And for a striker who relies a lot on his pace, which, appears to be, seemingly unaffected at the moment, that's going to catch up with him at some point, right? So Leicester are clearly in a position where they think we have an exceptionally top-class striker at the moment. We are going to need to replace this striker, not necessarily like for like, but certainly bring in enough quality to try and maintain the league positions that they've been pre-restart were attaining beforehand. Any chance of getting into the top four, and there's no way that a downgrading from Jamie Vardy is going to assist that. Given that he's such a unique player, I don't even know how you would start to go about replacing him, and at what point you try to do that as well, because he's clearly still playing well. So this impacts the sort of players that you might be looking to bring in. Probably not, I would assume, someone to start as a replacement for Vardy, in which case are you bringing in a young player who has potential, who can maybe replace him over time, or are you looking for a backup for now, and in the summer that you think Vardy maybe has finally dropped off the quality a little bit, that's when you look to properly replace him? Alex, how would you approach dealing with this situation?
Well, I think one of the ways Leicester have approached it is that they have actually altered the way they attack a little bit. So the video that we did looking at all of Vardy's goals, he is relying on pace less now. And I think one of the things about Vardy is that because so many of the goals that we associate with the title-winning side were these, running onto long through balls from Mahrez or Drinkwater, we forget how good Vardy is in the box in terms of his close-in movement, his ability to shift away from defenders, his ability to get onto the blind side, have a little acceleration over 3 or 4 yards to meet across. And Leicester's style under Rodgers has evolved towards something where he is able to do it without relying on pace quite as much. So I think that natural stylistic shift does give Vardy greater longevity than perhaps it would have done if he was simply playing in a counter-attacking direct side. Still, having said that, yes, obviously he's a massive part of what they do. I think in terms of not a like-for-like replacement, because I genuinely don't think that's possible, but someone I mentioned in the last podcast, Adrien Huneau at Rennes, is a very, very good kind of Vardy clone. He is quick, he's a good ball carrier. But he does have that predatory penalty box movement as well. Also, Odsonne Edouard, who's the Celtic striker, he's not a Vardy clone, but he's quick, he's direct, he finishes well running onto through balls. He's just a very promising all-round striker who's attracting a lot of attention from Premier League sides for good reason, and is the sort of player who I think could come in, spend a season working with Vardy coming off the bench, but then be ready to take over the mantle in a season or two.
And Seb, I'll put the same question to you as well.
Yeah, I got two different approaches. The first is to to find a complement to Vardy, someone that can come in and not understudy him, but support him. Someone who's used to counter-attacking, someone that's got pace, someone that can replicate some of the elements of Vardy's game. Obvious solution is Callum Wilson. It's an economic solution as well, because we believe he's available for somewhere between 10 and 15 million pounds. The future replacement thing, I agree with everything Alex said. It's tricky. So instead of trying to mimic every aspect of Vardy's game, I've just tried to look for pace and the ability to break behind. So I've gone for AZ Alkmaar's Myron Badu, who would cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
But that is your long-term option. I think what we have to accept with Vardy is two things. Firstly, that he's a young 33, because he came to the professional game very late. So he doesn't have the same miles on the clock as another player who's been who's been playing at this level from the age of 20 onwards. The second thing is when the end comes quickly with players that are athletically dependent, you have to be in a position to move on immediately. You cannot have a situation where Vardy's legs go in the middle of a season and then from a position of weakness, Leicester are trying to shop 6 months later after they've fallen down the table with a lack of goals. So they have to be in a position to manage this transition properly. So there has to be a player at the club who can shoulder the responsibility of being a first choice 9, and it has to happen before Vardy reaches the end of his usefulness. So it's awkward. No matter what you do here, politically it's tricky, and there'll probably be some friction at some point. But Badu's a fantastic player. He's going to appear in a couple of at least one of Alex's sensible transfer videos coming up. Spoiler alert, yes. But with good reason, because he's excellent.
Okay, well listen, that was Leicester City. In a moment we'll return and we'll be covering Brighton and Hove Albion. Okay, Arthur Stewart, who I assume is a sort of distant relation to our very own Alex Stewart here, asks for a left back for Brighton. Alex, let's start with you, and also can I get a little bit of an idea as to what Brighton are looking for from their fullbacks generally?
Yeah, it's tricky because they've obviously been using Dan Burn as a converted from a centre-back as a left-back. Also, Graham Potter is system-wise extremely flexible. So, sometimes he plays a back three, sometimes he plays a back four, and there's like a kind of narrow midfield. Sometimes
they call him the king of adapting, don't they?
Let's just enjoy that silence, shall we?
See, you almost did such a good job there, Seb, not to invade the silence, but I knew you wouldn't be able to handle it.
I just couldn't let it. I was so uncomfortable. I just couldn't.
Alex, do continue.
So I think in terms of what they want from a fullback, it's somebody who can provide width, either working as a wing back or working ahead of a kind of a narrowing midfield, almost a sort of 4-2-2-2. Because Andy Naylor in his piece for The Athletic was saying how Potter sort of wants to do more of that, in which case it's incumbent on the fullbacks to get forwards an awful lot. The dream pick, I think, would be Philip Kostic at Eintracht Frankfurt. He's been consistently one of the best left-sided defenders in the Bundesliga for a good few years now. He will guarantee assists. He's defensively pretty solid as well. And he's used to working with a back three. The other option is Anthony Catchy, I don't know, at Strasbourg, who is somebody who we've highlighted before in previous Sensible Transfer videos. Just consistently gets the ball forwards well. He's not quite as quick or dynamic, but he will move the ball with good passing into good areas. He's not necessarily going to whiz around on the overlap and pull crosses back, but there's a solidity there. He can also fill in as a centre back as well, which is a good option if Brighton want to play three at the back. So yeah, those are my two choices.
Okay, lots of different possibilities in terms of play style. I like it very much. Seb, left back, please.
Rico Henry, Brentford. Alex's point is really interesting and very pertinent. There are no rules really with Graham Potter's fullbacks because it's quite Brighton remain quite a fluid idea. So I've just found the most interesting, the most dynamic, the most cost efficient player I could think of really. And Henry's interesting. He's been around for a long time. He grew up at Walsall before he went to Brentford. very good player, very well thought of in the game. Certainly could play in the Premier League, and and also obviously that would provide a very nice contrast to what's there already. Because if you go from a fullback who is 6'7", tallest fullback in the history of organised football, to Rico Henry, that's quite a contrast. But then that could be quite useful, and a manager like Graham Potter, who is open to new ideas and shifting away from formations and styles, is that could be a strength. So yeah, Rico Henry, I'd like that one.
Charles Pumphrey asks for a striker. Alex, can you give me some names for a striker?
Yeah, so Brighton really needs somebody who can score goals, obviously, but somebody who can also kind of drop in an assist with link-up play. I picked 2 strikers, actually, for the Sensible Transfers article that I did with Andy for The Athletic. So I'm just going to say those names because it's easier. Mirko Marich, who's Osijek in the Croatian top tier. What's nice about him is his ability to drop off and play through passes to other people. He kind of creates like a 10, but he will also be up and finish like a 9. He got 20 goals last season. A slightly different style of striker, but also from the Croatian top tier, is Antonio Kolak, who is at Rijeka, again scored 20 goals. He's more of an aerial presence. Think someone like Palencia at Eintracht Frankfurt, somebody who will contest balls, who will hold the play up well, but also has nice deft feet, who can contribute to link up. And that's, I think everyone, well, not everyone, but most people are looking now for strikers, particularly if they're playing with one up, who can drop off and kind of act as a creator as well. Brighton, if they play with 2 up, they'll play with Neal Maupay, who's quick and small and stocky, and will look to run into through balls. So they either want somebody who can feed that, or they want somebody who can win flick-ons and get Maupay going in behind. Those are 2 options that will do either of those things.
Well, it interests you to know that the current goalkeeper of Houston Dynamo is a player called Mirko Marich, also Croatian. So, is that closer to being similar?
Yeah, that's much closer. Thank you.
That's good. Seb, presumably the task here, one might take a route of saying perhaps a supplementary assistance or backup for Neal Maupay rather than a replacement, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. So, that's kind of the mentality I was working on. I don't want to find a replacement. I want to find someone that's similar to Maupay, who would potentially work in the system in the same way and who wouldn't cause disruption. So I've gone for John Cordoba from Cologne, who was quite impressive. He scored 13 goals from 23 starts in the Bundesliga last season, which for a team that weren't prolific, they weren't goal shy, Cologne, but that's a pretty good return. And he has a lot of the same abilities. He's a mobile forward, seems to work well with the kind of players that Brighton have. Lucas Trossard I really like, by the way, at Brighton. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. Really nice player. And yeah, I don't want to do is I don't want to sort of stick in a 7'10" target man and say, right, well, that's your plan B. Let's
Nikolai
try and
Zigic.
God, I've forgotten about him. What a player!
He's one of the best of all time.
I think he was 6'7". He
very nearly went to Arsenal. I remember there was one summer.
I think he was actually 6'8", guys.
No, I think he was
actually 6'8".
Yeah. Okay. I think he was. But what a player! What a
player.
head! He had a big head, and he always headed the ball because his head was very big.
He didn't need to run.
Just stride, and you're keeping up pace with Marcus Rashford at that height.
He should be a defensive midfielder then, by that rationale, shouldn't he?
Yeah, I just loved Nikolai Zigic. I really liked him, and also I loved when he was paired. There was a season where he was paired with at Birmingham. What was his name? Really famous. He scored the goal in the League Cup final against Arsenal.
Oh, Obafemi Martins.
Yeah, there was a season where he played alongside Obafemi Martins, and the height disparity was just stunning. It really was like the exemplary of that little and big combination. But I've derailed you with thoughts of the past.
We used to have Peter Crouch and Kevin Phillips playing alongside each other,
nice.
which was absolutely
incredible.
that.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Whoever you are, whatever your shape, whatever your size, you can offer something to Birmingham and Southampton. So there you go. Please continue, Seb.
So we spoke a little bit a couple of days ago about this, and Brighton need goals. We know that. They scored 39, only 39 all season, which is fewer than Bournemouth, fewer than Villa, Burnley, and Sheffield United. So they're not in the good part of that category. I don't think the answer is to try and find a 25 goal a season man. It's to supplement the squad with goals. So we've done that with Cordoba, but also, and this is a player who's been linked to all kinds of other clubs, but the best fit for him by far is probably Brighton. Eberici Easy from QPR, just a lovely player to watch. Full of skill and technique and ability, and I like him to compete for Aaron Moy's spot in that side. It's kind of like I suppose it's sort of the modern equivalent of the number 10 role, but he's interesting, and if Brighton could do something for under £20 million, I think that'd be a really good deal.
Is that your midfield pick?
No, well, it's my attacking supplement the forward line pick.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't done a pure midfielder. I've just got that kind of support because I wanted to do address this goals problem by committee. So I think that's quite nice. Bring those two players in. I think we're in a pretty good place at Brighton.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I'll finish off with Alex because Chili Sharp asks for a creative stroke attacking midfielder. Brackets, our brackets, not Chili Sharp's brackets, probably to compete with Moy. What do you think, Alex?
I think it's an odd one in terms of working out exactly how Brighton want their midfielders to play, because as we've said, Potter has this flexibility that you can see him kind of coming up with different solutions to who's going to get the ball into the strikers, whether the striker is dropping off, that kind of thing. Obviously, if you drop in a player like Easy, then you're getting creativity and dynamism from him. I think you can get it from slightly further back. There's a guy called Marcel Harken at Arminia Bielefeld, who's in Bundesliga too. Got 13 assists last season. The reason I like him is that he's kind of stocky, he's extremely busy, he likes to push up and operate in the space just around the penalty area with really nice through passing, but he is also a very, very aggressive presser. He's not shy of putting in a tackle. So while he is effectively a 10, because he's coming out of that quite high octane style of German coaching, you could play him further back and you get that kind of balance of creativity and busyness and pressing and defensive work. He looks ready to step up. It's always difficult with players that are at that sort of level, but I think there are certain coaches, and I would count Potter among them, who can take a player who is otherwise not necessarily going to develop to that level and be able to do that with them. I think Potter's really, really smart in that way. So, Brighton have shown that they're not afraid to shop outside of kind of the obvious leagues. And I think that would be an interesting one to go for.
It is interesting. Lovely stuff. I'm excited about watching Brighton next year. I'm glad they're still in the league. Okay, well, that's the end of Brighton and also the end of the podcast. So thank you to Alex Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you to Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Thank you.
And thank you to you, dear listener, those of you still with us, true friends or asleep. But thanks very much for spending this time with us and downloading the podcast. A little treat for you is for me to remind you that if you want to read a Sensible Transfers piece about your team, you can do so on The Athletic. And the best way to do that is to get 40% off an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo Transfers. That's theathletic.com/Tifo Transfers. Now, we will be back in 2 days' time. For the next few weeks, we'll be releasing 3 podcast episodes a week. So that'll be an additional episode on Saturdays. And this Saturday's episode, I believe, we cover Tottenham, Burnley, and West Ham. So look out for that. But for now, that's all. Thank you very much, and au revoir.